My name is Averil. I'm an independent senator elected for the first time in 2011, and I'm running for election now on the TCD Shannon panel. I studied BET here in Trinity with a joint degree in business and politics. I was also president of the Students' Union. And as a senator over the last few years since I was elected, I've had very close ties to Trinity, but working with student union officers over the years, with college societies, and also with staff, and arguing in particular in the Senate for greater investment in education. I think one of the most negative aspects of the recession have been the education cuts, which I think are incredibly short-sighted, because they'll cost us an awful lot more in the long run. So that's one of the main issues that I have been working on in the Senate. I've been a very strong advocate for education. That's why my campaign now for re-election is supported by people like Tom Collins, who'd be one of the most respected professors of education in the country, by John Carr, who's a former president or general secretary of the INTO, the Primary Teachers Union, by other teachers, lecturers, students, because I have been a strong advocate for education, and that is an area that I would like to see get much more focus in the next few years. I think it's very worrying, not just to current students but also to graduates, to see Trinity falling in the university rankings. I think that should be a source of concern for all of us, that the degree that you work so hard for is being devalued by government cuts. And I want to fight in the Senate over the next few years that as resources become available, that they're prioritised for education, because we need to make sure that Trinity and other third level colleges have the funding that they need to provide high quality teaching and research.
Sure. So would you be supportive of the repeal of the 8th Amendment?
Yes, I have spoken in favour of the repeal of the 8th Amendment, but in the Senate and more recently on primetime on RTE. I think our current situation is hypocritical. We do have abortion in Ireland, it just happens to take place elsewhere, and I think the only women who don't have terminations, if they wish, are those who are too poor to do so, and I know that includes students. I think that's very unfair. I've also met families who've had diagnoses of fatal fetal abnormalities, so parents who really desperately wanted to have a child and were delighted when they heard that they were pregnant, only then to be told that their child couldn't survive outside the womb. And I think it's disgusting, and I think it's cruel that we send people like that away instead of looking after them here and giving them what little comfort we can. By letting them have termination here, we turn our back on them and send them off on a one-way flight to the UK. I think we'll have to be clear before the referendum what the legislation is going to be, because otherwise I don't believe we'll win a referendum unless people are clear as to what exactly will be replacing it. So I think we have to have that debate. I think opinion polls show that there's support for access to termination, at least in cases of rape, fatal fetal abnormality, threats of mother's life, health. I would like to see us go broader than that, but I think we'll have a job to do to build the kind of public support. I think the first priority must be taking the 8th Amendment out of our constitution, and then seeing what political consensus we can get in terms of legislation that we put into place now. I've no doubt we'll be back looking at the issue then again, probably in 10 or 20 years after that. I joined Fianna Fáil originally when I was in college, and I don't come from a political family. Family still think I'm crazy that I want to do this job at all when I have a good business degree from Trinity. But I joined because of their commitment to education, so I didn't have a traditional route into Trinity. I grew up in an area where most people left school early, council estate. My two older siblings, my parents, everybody left school at 14, 15, same most of the friends that I grew up with. But I worked hard and I got a place here in Trinity, which was amazing, but very quickly realised that I didn't know anybody else here. And also, as doors were opening up for me and companies were in trying to recruit our business class and offer us opportunities, but in Ireland, New York, London, I realised those opportunities were never going to be there for my brothers, for my parents, and I thought that was wrong. So I got involved in politics to campaign for everybody to have a fair chance in life, but particularly for everybody to have access to education. And when I looked at all the parties, Fianna Fáil had a strong track record on that. They brought in free second level education, set up the Institutes of Technology in places like Tala and Blanchardstown, where people wouldn't have no history of coming to Trinity or to UCD or other universities. So that's the reason that I joined. I ran for them as a candidate for the first time in 2011. I would have been as annoyed as a as annoyed as many other people with some of the decisions that had been made before the general election, but I thought there was a need to get a new generation of people involved. I was very outspoken about the things that I wasn't happy with, and I've never shied away from doing that. And I felt that as a younger person that would have an opportunity to change the party, and that it would listen to the message that it got in the election in 2011 and change for the better. I worked very hard to try and achieve that within the party, but when I felt it wasn't happening, I left. And it would have been a lot easier for me to put my head down and go along with things. I was a very high profile member of the parliamentary party. I still have colleagues that say to me, you know, you'd have got elected in the general election, you could be, you know, a Fianna Fáil government, you could be a minister now. I was their only high profile female member. But at the end of the day, I lost faith in the party, and I wasn't going to go knocking on doors asking people to vote for a party that I don't have confidence in. Mental health's a big personal priority of mine. And as a senator, I've assisted individuals and families in distress. I also published a national action plan on youth mental health. And I'm working with Headstrong and Sea Change and other big national organisations to get that implemented. My campaign is supported by Tony Bates, who's the head of Headstrong, which is Ireland's National Centre for Youth Mental Health, by Conor Cusack, by Niall Brezzy, because of the work that I've done specifically on mental health. I think we need a number of things. One is to end the stigma. I think that's the biggest problem in Ireland, is people don't talk about mental health. And we need to change that and normalise conversations. You know, that it's you don't have a problem telling your mate that you've got the migraine from hell, or that, you know, you hurt your leg. So it should be just as normal. Like, people get physically sick. Sometimes people also get mentally unwell. It's important to be able to talk about that. So we need to end the stigma. We need to promote positive mental health, and we need to put services in place for those who need help. I wrote a national action plan on youth mental health a few years ago, and the focus on that was working with young people from preschool up, so from the youngest possible age, to teach them to talk about mental health, to equip our young people with coping skills and resilience, and teach them that, you know, life is tough sometimes, and really crap things happen to really nice people, and it can be difficult to get through them, you know, and that there are turbulent times in your life. You know, for teenagers, the levels of youth suicide in Ireland are really scary, among the highest in the world, and a lot of young people are struggling to cope with issues from their body image and how they look, or come to terms with their sexual orientation, or family breakups, or different issues within their home, and we have to teach our young people how to cope with that. And I think the younger we can do that, the better, because then those kids will grow up feeling that it's normal to talk about mental health in the same way as they'd say, you know, I've got a toothache or I've got a tummy ache. And then if we can do that, we'll end up with more resilient adults. So I think that is the place to start, is at the youth mental health side. But we also have to recognise that we have adults in crisis.
Yeah.
And we have to have services there for people. I've worked with families. Young man recently took his own life in Coolock after being turned away from Beaumont. He'd gone there with his family seeking help, told them he was suicidal, and they sent him away with a letter for an appointment a few weeks later. He didn't make it to that appointment. And we've heard so many stories like that through Brezzy's Lust for Life project and things like that, where people are starting to share their personal stories. And one of the biggest problems with mental health is people don't seek help. They suffer in silence and don't seek help. So I think it's crazy that when somebody does actually reach out, that they could be turned away. So we need prevention and to promote positive mental health and help people to look after themselves. And then we also need services for those who are in distress. Yeah, I'd say, personally, I think that having a third level education is now like second level was 20, 30 years ago. You know, we once had a debate in this country, and it's not that, it's long before you or I, but when my parents were in school, we didn't have free second level education. That's the reason why my mum only has primary school. My dad did 1 year of second level, and then he had to drop out because they couldn't afford to pay for it. Now the debate has moved on. Now you're expected to have third level, and in fact you're not expected even just to have an undergraduate degree, you're expected to have a master's in many cases now to get a job. So I think we have to accept that education is a public good, and that nobody should be turned away because they can't afford it. Because that doing so is not just unfair, it's also economically crazy, because we need to equip our people. We need to, for our economy, we need to be fighting on the internationally competitive in terms of skills and education. We don't have oil, we don't have big natural resources. And what we have traditionally traded off is having a well-educated population. That's now at risk because of the cuts to third level over the last few years. And I think we need to change that, and for me that is public investment in education. It's accepting that education, including third level education, is a public good and should be supported, and that economically the short-term cost of that will pay itself back many times over into the future, and the cost of not doing it is even greater.